All right, guys, welcome on back to the show. Before we get into our next segment here, I just want to give you guys a quick reminder that if you have any questions or any comments that you want to shout out in the super chat, just go ahead and hit the super chat on YouTube or on GSMCSports.net. If you have any tips, donations that you want to leave, you can go ahead and hit that website as well. Otherwise, any comments or questions, always greatly appreciated. So if you have any, definitely write them in the super chat or in the comments on YouTube, and we will try and get to them as soon as we can. So let's go ahead and get into the rest of the show here. Next segment that I have is top 5 running backs in the NFL. Now, I know probably the top 2 on this list are not going to really surprise too many people given last year's set of circumstances, but let's dive in. Number 5, I have Jonathan Taylor of the Colts, and he obviously has been consistently good for a number of years now. Last year's stats, he played 14 games at about 303 total carries, just over 1,400 yards rushing. That's good for about a 4.7 yards per carry average. Also had 11 touchdowns and 1 receiving touchdown. And he did have 1 fumble that he lost, but overall, pretty solid numbers for Jonathan Taylor. The 1 fumble that he lost, if you remember, was against Denver a little bit later in the year when they were actually in control of that game and the Broncos needed to win, and the Colts needed to win too for playoff positioning. And they were getting ready to go up by multiple scores. Jonathan Taylor had an easy walk-in touchdown because he had a nice long run that led him to that. And right as he got across the line, he does what, for some reason, so many other players have done in the past, and that is let go of the ball before you cross the plane. I see it happen. I've seen it happen. Everybody's seen it happen a number of years now, and I will never, ever understand why players keep doing that. Like, hold on to the ball until you get in the end zone. If you have to hold on to it until you give it to the ref, until the ref asks you for the ball, then do that. Just don't drop the ball. I mean, that just boggles my mind every time I see it from players in the NFL, and it just continues to happen too. You would think people would be more, adamant about holding on to the ball and not giving it away, because then it can roll into the end zone and then it's a touchback going the other way. So never understand that. But Jonathan Taylor, although he is a really great running back, he's top 5 in my opinion. That was a boneheaded move that he made. Probably the worst play he made all year. Of course, it was just 1 play. He still had a good year overall, but that was a costly play because that changed the whole momentum of that game. And but Jonathan Taylor is still a very, very good running back. So make no mistake there. He's the best player the Colts have by far. That's Michael Pittman Jr. Maybe you could make an argument for him, but Jonathan Taylor is really the whole thing. He's the straw that stirs the drink. In other words, Jonathan Taylor is their offense entirely. So they lose him, they really have no shot. So I have Jonathan Taylor at number 5. Number 4 is a guy that we just mentioned as most likely to win Comeback Player of the Year, and that is Christian McCaffrey. And obviously he didn't have much stats last year because he was hurt all year, but the previous year he was in the running for MVP, and I personally thought he should have won MVP over who actually did win it was Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying Lamar Jackson's a bad quarterback. He certainly deserved MVP this year, even though he didn't win it. But that particular year that Lamar won MVP, he didn't have the numbers to be an MVP, in my opinion. Christian McCaffrey had those numbers. He had well over 20 touchdowns total in terms of rushing and receiving. He had over 1,000 yards. He did everything. He caught the ball. He ran the ball. He was very, very productive. And again, he was snake bitten by injuries last year, but I think he's going to come back just as well as he had been playing before that injury that cost him most of the year, if not all of the year. I think he's going to come back and play a lot better this year. He's going to be extra motivated with all of the nonsense that he had to, deal with last year with all of the injuries and everything. But I really like Christian McCaffrey. I've always thought he's a very good running back, very dynamic type of running back because he can do a number of different things. He's not just a home run hitter. He's elusive. He can actually run pretty good routes for a running back, and he's got good hands for a running back, catching the ball out of the backfield and all that. But, obviously he's got great vision, which is what you need. And he doesn't really fumble much either, which is another very, very good attribute to have if you're a running back. So Christian McCaffrey is my number 4 right there. So number 3, I have Jahmyr Gibbs of the Lions. He is one of the two-headed monster at running back that they do have in Detroit. You could even make the argument that their other running back, David Montgomery, deserves some recognition on a list like this too. It's just I don't think he's top 5. I think he's definitely up there around top 10 range in running backs, and that's a two-headed monster they have in Detroit. But Jahmyr Gibbs is the star when it comes to running back in Detroit. He had, obviously, David Montgomery had a few injuries last year, so he missed some time, but Jahmyr Gibbs started all 17 games, had 1,400 yards, had a 5.6 yards per carry average, 16 rushing touchdowns, and he also added 4 receiving touchdowns as well. So 20 total touchdowns, and he also had 517 receiving yards too. So that's almost 2,000 yards from scrimmage that Jahmyr Gibbs had last year. So he was absolutely effective. That Detroit offense entirely was very good, but if you can stand out on an offense like that, you're doing something right, and Jahmyr Gibbs is definitely that guy. He's elusive, he's a great runner, great vision, he's explosive, very fast. If he gets out into the open field, it's very hard to take him down just because of his speed. He's an absolute weapon for that Detroit Lions offense for sure, and I really like what Jahmyr Gibbs has done so far for the Lions. And number 2, I know we're kind of getting through this kind of quickly here, but number 2 I have is Derrick Henry for the Ravens. Like I said, these top 2 shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I think you can all guess who number 1 is, of course, too. But number 2, I have Derrick Henry. His first season as a Baltimore Raven, and it was not anything to sneeze at all. He was just a shade under 2,000 yards rushing on 325 carries, 5.9 yards per carry average, 16 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. He was fantastic. He had one fumble that he lost that was against Pittsburgh early in the year, but he was solid, in terms of taking care of the ball from that point on. And he was one of those guys that can just absolutely kill you if you don't get him at the line of scrimmage. That's the thing with Derrick Henry, how strong of a runner he is. Once he gets that full head of steam going, there's virtually nobody that's going to stop him. He's just going to bowl through whoever it is that tries to tackle him in the secondary. He's a mismatch for anybody in the secondary because of how big he is and how fast he is. He's deceptively fast for a guy that size, too. You don't realize how quick he is until he gets out into the middle or gets out into the open field, and he's just running by defenders, and they can't do anything about it. When he's playing like that, he's one of the most effective running backs in the game. You could even make the argument that when he's playing at his peak, at his absolute best, he could, give Saquon Barkley a good run for his money in terms of who the better running back is. I think Saquon Barkley obviously is the better running back, and we'll get to that in a second. But Derrick Henry is no slouch. He's been doing this since he was in Tennessee. He's been doing it since he was in Yulee High School. Before he was drafted or before he was picked up and recruited by Alabama, before ultimately being drafted by the Titans. He's been doing this his entire football playing career, all the way back at high school. He's just been bigger than everybody else in every level of the game. So he uses his stature, his physical strength, of course, to be as dominant of a runner as he is, but he is also deceptively fast too. And if you can get those kind of that kind of combination in a running back, it's deadly. It's a very deadly combination. He is a very good running back, and it's almost unfair that he's on a team like the Ravens, who already ran the ball so effectively before Derrick Henry got there. I mean, Lamar Jackson had almost 1,000 yards rushing by himself last year, and that was with Derrick Henry with almost 2,000 yards. So they ran for over 3,000 yards when you compare the other running backs and everything. That as a team, they ran for over 3,000 yards, which is pretty crazy in today's NFL, especially with it being a much more pass-happy, pass-oriented type of league nowadays. Even though last year I would say is kind of a resurgence, a revolution of sorts of the running back position, because there was a number of guys, and just these guys on this list right here just shows you how great of a season it was for running backs. Much like the previous season was for backup quarterbacks, that's what it was this year for running backs. You really see, like with a couple years ago with the backup quarterbacks, with all of the guys that were having success being backups, you started to kind of see the importance of having a quality backup, or at least a serviceable backup, so that it could keep your team afloat and still give your team a chance to do things if you lose your starter. And now last year put a lot of emphasis on how important it is to have a strong run game in order to be successful. The Eagles are a perfect example of that, and the Ravens are a perfect example of that. They run the ball really, really well, and they usually win a lot more games than they don't, because of that, because they're able to control the ball, and they're able to just essentially just play keep away from any defense, especially a defense that struggles against stopping the run. So, Derrick Henry was fantastic all year long, and it continued into the playoffs before they ultimately got knocked out by Buffalo. But really like Derrick Henry. He's number 2. And for a guy that's, in his 30s, it's very impressive what he's able to do, because that's typically when you start seeing running backs start to decline a little bit. But Derrick Henry doesn't show any signs of decline. If anything, it seems like he has gotten better since going to Baltimore, which is a scary thought. And we'll see how he bounces back this year from the Ravens falling short of their ultimate goal of the Super Bowl. So we'll see how he does in year 2 in Baltimore. Moving on to the number 1 running back, it is no surprise to anybody that Saquon Barkley takes this spot. He, of course, was just a game away from breaking Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing yards record. If he would have played in that final game, which was a meaningless game, because they had already established their seeding and all of that, so he didn't need to play. But if he did play, he probably would have broken the record. But at the same time, there would always be that asterisk next to his record, because Eric Dickerson had that record and got that record in fewer games than Saquon Barkley. Even if Saquon were to get it in 16 games, it would still have been less games than Eric Dickerson played, because they have increased the amount of games that the NFL have played during the season over the course of the past few years. So his numbers: 345 carries, 2,005 rush yards, had a 5.8 yards per carry average, 13 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. And of course, he had a very good playoff run as well. He didn't do much in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs actually did a pretty good job keeping him contained, which is not an easy thing to do. Saquon Barkley is a very good running back, best running back in the league. But I'm excited to see what he might do in year 2 as well, with everybody. Surely they will be planning heavily. Whenever it's Eagles week, the teams will be planning heavily on how to stop Saquon Barkley. That's what you have to do with the Eagles, is first you have to stop Saquon Barkley in order to have any chance. If you can do that, then you can, start going on to other parts of the Eagles offense. But Jalen Hurts is also a very good quarterback, and so is that receiver room too. They're all very good. So it's just a talented team overall. So Saquon Barkley fits in well with the Eagles and that really, really good offensive line that they have. It's a night and day difference between them and the Giants when he was still, showing out and having great games with New York. He was by far their best player, and the Giants decided to bet on Daniel Jones, who is also no longer on the team now. So it was a rough year for the Giants last year, with the Saquon stuff and the Daniel Jones stuff and just all of that, the hard knock stuff. It just wasn't a good year for the Giants, and Saquon lifting the Super Bowl trophy at the end of the year was just an icing on the cake for Saquon, but a nail in the coffin of the Giants in that season. That was just one extra gut punch when their season was already over. So, those are my top 5 picks. I think it's a pretty solid list, I think. Jonathan Taylor at 5, Christian McCaffrey at 4, Jahmyr Gibbs at 3, and Derrick Henry at 2, and Saquon at 1. I think that's a pretty solid list. I think most people would agree with that list, that these guys, you could probably throw in Josh Jacobs there too for the Packers. He's a pretty solid running back as well. And we'll see what Ashton Genty does and all these other good running backs that are coming out in the rookie draft class this coming season. So there's a lot of good running backs coming out. So we'll see if anybody else starts to make their way close to this list as well. So that's it for that list. Before we go into our next list, which is in our next segment when we're covering edge rushers, I'm just going to take another break real quick. It'll just be a couple minutes, and then we're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about some edge rushers. And I'm sure this will be